WASA Distance Education and PLAR History. So we're continuing with this week. It's week 2. This is our second class, and it's Thursday, September 12th. It is not too late to register for 2024-25 courses at WASA. You can use our online application form, or you can also call the office. You can talk to Candace if you are reapplying for PLAR, or if you are applying for grade 11 or 12 courses, you can talk to Michelle. She is our education counselor. When you use the online application form, if you do not have a phone number to complete the form, or if you don't have your status card number, or if you have if you forgot your card and you can't fill those there's spaces in there for putting in the numbers for phone number or for your card number. If you don't have that, you can use zeros to fill the application, and it will complete your form. You can always call us back, especially for those students that are reapplying. We have that information already. There will be application draws for students who register, and also DECs. There will be prizes. So if you apply, your name will go in for the draw. DECs who are registering students, your name will also go in for a draw. So we will keep you posted on that. We will also continue to do end of term draws for students who submit work and for students who complete or earn a credit. So that'll be for terms 1A, 1B, 2A, and 2B. Again, there are important changes for new and returning PLAR students. So if you had missed our meeting on Friday, here are the changes that you need to be aware of. So PLAR students have the option now, so you have a choice of completing an open book culminating activity instead of doing the key questions for the PLAR subjects that you need to complete. So even if you have completed a lesson in PLAR history or PLAR math or geography or science, you may now have the option of challenging it. So you can take the culminating. It can be emailed to the DEC. Supervision is not required, and you can take the culminating activity home to complete. Okay, so students can take the culminating activity, and if you want to complete it at home, you can do so. If you want to go to the learning center and do it, that's fine too. But you don't need supervision in order to take the test. Successful students, you will receive your equivalent credits, and then you can proceed to complete your senior PLAR and then go on to register for your senior courses. If the culminating activity is not passed, then the key questions in the lessons must be completed. So this will prepare you to retake the culminating activity. Students are permitted several attempts to pass the culminating activity. Your DECs will inform you if you're already registered in PLAR about the change, and then new PLAR students will be informed when you register for this school year. Here's a note that students who get their equivalent credits from just doing the test, you will not qualify for the GWLO credit. Students who complete all lessons and tests will qualify for the GW30 credit. So that's how you get the GWL30 credit, is by doing all the lessons and all the tests. So culminating activities are available for PLAR history, English, science, geography. So remember, these are all PLAR, and PLAR math. So if you choose to do the lessons, the PLAR packages that you receive are the same whether you register through radio, Zoom, or IL. PLAR students may continue where you left off, again, if you're not planning on doing the culminating first. Remember, you have that option now. If you have any questions, you can contact me. The number is on the cover page of each of the lessons and on the study guide. So here you will see the number for the WASA radio, the studio, if you want to call in. If you want to listen using radio 91.9 FM or Bell Express View, the channel is 972. Remember, these are both audio, which means you won't see what I have here on my desktop. My Zoom link is there, my meeting ID, my passcode, the number for the office, the fax number, my email, and my Facebook and YouTube profile, which is the same, J. Mercer WASA for both. And again, you will see all this on the first page or cover page of each of the lessons. So if you're trying to join in on Zoom and you don't know the meeting ID, this is where you can look. If you're needing extra help, so if you're unable to join the classes or if you're working during the day, you can go to YouTube and you can watch the classes. Go to the playlist. It'll show you the playlist for PLAR history, geography, and science. If you're working ahead, you can go to the PLAR History 2A 2024 and check out the classes there. It's organized by subject, so in this case it's PLAR history, then lesson. So this one I'm underlining is lesson 2. So if you're having problems with key question 20, you would look at the key questions 19 to 21. If you don't have access to Wi-Fi or internet, you may request a USB of classes. We will download it on a flash drive and we will send it up to you. Okay, next up, all students registered with WASA, you have access to a G Suite account. So just remember, when you are accessing your Gmail, you have to log out of all your accounts. So especially if you already have a Gmail account, you need to log out of all your accounts, otherwise it will not work. So choose this, sign out of all accounts. Then you will add your new account, which is add another account. This is where you would add in your, it will be your name. So student at nnecschools.org. If you can't get in, so if you forget your password, I can reset it, or if you are just not able to get in, I can check for you. I'm able to activate your email if you'd like. Once you have an NNEC Schools account, you have access to Gmail, you have access to Google Drive, Google Classroom, Docs, Sheets, Calendar, and so on. Remember, this is a free email for all students that's registered with WASA or NNEC. So those of you who are completing key questions or submitting the culminating, there are several ways that you can send it out. You can scan your work by using your iPhone Notes app and then emailing it or sending it through Messenger. So 2 options here. You can take a picture of it. You can send it through the Facebook Messenger. So here's a picture. Or you can scan it. So here's a picture of a scanned work. Make sure you're emailing it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca and then CCing to the teacher that's marking your work. That's if you're using the email option. If you take a picture, then it will obviously go to me, or if you scan it and then send it to my messenger, it will go directly to me. Another option is sending it through Google Classroom. Remember to sign out of your accounts so that you can get into your NNEC schools. If you already have a Gmail account, you simply submit it through here. You can share it. So when you're looking at your document on Google Docs, it will say private to only me. That means only you can see it. Once you click that button and or click the share button, type in or enter my email, I will then be able to see what you have shared. Another option is have your DEC scan or fax it for you, or you can just drop it off at our Sioux Lookout office if you're around, or if you're in Sioux Lookout. There is still the WASA outdoor mailbox. Please make sure you put your name on your work, or if you want, you can just knock on the door and you can drop it off at our reception area. If you have other questions or concerns, make sure you contact me. We are continuing Lesson 1, Canada 1900 to 1939. If you have this course calendar for PLAR History and Geography, it just shows you the timeline for each week. This will give you an idea if you're working on your key questions, which lessons you should be completing so that you will have the time to finish it by week 9. Again, this is for students who are working on the key questions. Here's a checklist of the key questions. We did as far as key question 5. So we have 1 to 5 already completed, and we're working on the other key questions for lesson 1. There are 18 in total for lesson 1. So once you start submitting work, you will receive a mark sheet. Okay, let's continue. We did the reciprocity issue on page 12. We also completed Indigenous peoples in the early 20th century. We did treaties, and we talked about residential schools. We completed key questions up to key question 5 on Tuesday. Let's now look at survivors' voices on page 15, and then the First Nations historical timeline on page 17. After that, we will look at Canada in the First World War, so that's 1914 to 1918. We will look at what caused it, and conscription and participation. We might even have time to look at one of our spotlights, Francis Pegahmagabow on page 21. Okay, survivors' voices. This is on page 15. So in 1996, there was a report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People regarding residential schools as a major factor in the high rates of substance abuse, suicide, family problems. On the other hand, you also had students who have begun the healing process and have moved on to lead successful and healthy lives. In 2009, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, or TRC, they began a process of listening to the stories of residential school survivors. They listened to their families and others that were affected by the residential school system. Then in 2015, the TRC, they published a report on the residential school system in Canada. This report had 6 volumes, and in addition to that, they also published a book called the survivors speak, and this contained stories of students who attended these schools. So if you want to check this out, you can go to this link is newsinteractives.cbc.ca beyond 94. So from that came the 94 calls to action, so beyond 94. These are individual instructions to guide governments, communities, and faith groups down the road to reconciliation. Here's an example of one of the entries in the TRC. In her memoir of attending the Capel School in the early 20th century, Louise Moyne wrote, "Although the boys milked cows, we never ate butter or drank whole milk. It was common knowledge that the butter was being sold to the villagers. Why was it sold when the children went without? The priests and nuns ate butter." This was page 540. For breakfast, the teachers had eggs 6 times a week and bacon 4 times a week, while the students had eggs 3 times a week and never had bacon. For dinner, in addition to the main meat dish, the teachers were served potatoes and additional vegetable every day, cheese 6 times a week, and butter with every meal. The students had 2 dinners at which potatoes were the only vegetable. They were never served either butter or cheese at dinner. The teachers were served tea with every dinner. No mention is made of any beverage being provided to the students, which suggests they were not being served milk at dinner. Okay, so that's just an excerpt or from the TRC. So listening to the voices of survivors is crucial for understanding the impact of the residential school system. By doing so, we can learn about its legacy and work towards improving relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. So you can see here, these are images showing a young boy before and after attending residential school. Okay, it shows in the first picture, he's dressed in his traditional clothing, and then again with the assimilation as the goal of residential school, he was not allowed to dress in his tradition. The First Nations historical timeline shows beginning 1871 to 1877, the treaties number 1 to 7 signed. So you can see how it goes from there right down to about 1930s. For example, 1885, Louis Riel led the Métis in the unsuccessful Northwest Rebellion against the Canadian government. 1893, Duncan Campbell Scott becomes Deputy Superintendent General of the Department of Indian Affairs, and his stated objective was assimilation. He ruled that department until 1932. Then you have 1914 to 1918. Aboriginal men enlist to fight in World War I, even though they do not have the full rights of Canadian citizens. 1921, Treaty 11 signed. 1922, Dr. Peter Bryce published a book based on his previous report called The Story of a National Crime. And in this book, he expressed grave concerns about the Indian residential schools in Canada, including the number of children who had died from tuberculosis. And the last entry here is 1930s. In the 1930s, the residential school system totaled 80 schools. Okay, we can look at key questions 5 to 7. That's on page 34. So remember, when you're answering the key questions, use the provided information that's in your lesson. You could also use your own knowledge and experience, but you do not need to use the internet or Wi-Fi to look up answers. Okay, so we did complete key question 5. What are treaties and what did it give the Canadian government? Remember, there are 2 parts to this question. So the first part you're answering what are treaties, and then the second part says what did it give the Canadian government? Okay, key question number 6. What does TRC stands for and what did it do? This one is a 2-part question as well. So the first part, you will tell me what TRC stands for. And then the next part of the question, so that you will receive full marks, tell me what did it do. So the TRC, and then write down the answer to the second part of the question. Key question 7. Now this is your opinion. That means what do you think? In your opinion, why is it important to listen to the stories of residential school survivors? So you would start off with, in my opinion, it is important to listen to the stories of residential school survivors. So tell me your opinion. Okay, our next topic is Canada in the First World War. So the first thing we're going to look at here is the word war. If you look it up in the dictionary, it means that it's a state of armed conflict between different nations or states or different groups within a nation or state. So for example, Japan declared war on Germany. So the key word here is conflict. So the conflict can be defined as a disagreement or struggle. And it could be between people who have different ideas. Maybe they have different beliefs, values, goals, or needs. Okay, so that's a conflict. So let's see what the conflict was. Okay, so World War I happened from 1914 to 1918, and it affected Canada. The war was caused by many things, but it all started when Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophia were assassinated. Okay, they were both killed. This event led countries around the world to get involved in the conflict in Europe. Okay, so the word assassination in this case is a murder of an important person in a surprise attack, either for political or religious reasons. So the victims here, you see the pictures of our Archduke Ferdinand of Austria, and Sophie, she was the Duchess of Hohenberg. So they were in the Bosnian city, and they were returning from an official visit to the city hall, and the assassin was 19-year-old at the time, Gavrilo Princip, and he was a Serbian. He believed that the death of the Archduke is the key that would release his people from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So that was his motivation for the assassination. And if you're following along, you can read this on page 18 of your lesson 1 book. Okay, so when the war started, many young men enlisted in the army because they thought it would be a great adventure. Okay, others who tried to enlist were told they were not wanted because of their race or ethnicity. Okay, for women, they served as drivers and nurses on the front lines. And this also affected the women back in Canada because now women had the opportunity to take on different roles, including working at jobs that were not available to them before the war. Okay, causes of the war. So it was not just the one thing that caused it. So it wasn't just by one reason. There were also indirect background factors. For example, there was an increase of militarism, alliance systems, imperialism, and nationalism. So these were all part of the causes of war. So this was happening in European countries and caused feelings between nations to become tense and be ready for war. Because countries believed that might was right, many countries like Germany and Britain, they tried to have bigger armies and navies than the others. For example, Britain became worried that the German Navy would grow as large as its own, and then the British feared that Germany would take over the seas. So let's look at those four words. The first one is militarism, and that just means it's a policy of building up strong military forces so that they can get themselves ready for war. Alliances, that's agreements between nations that they will protect each other in case of war. Nationalism, that means having pride in or devotion to their own country. And imperialism, that just means when one country takes over another country and they take over them economically and politically. So in alliances between countries, that became very important because countries needed help from each other in their race to have more power in colonies. So in this case, we have alliances, we have Triple Entente. So France, Russia, and Britain, they belong to the Triple Entente because they wanted to protect themselves from Austria, Hungary, Italy, and Germany. And that alliance was called the Triple Alliance. Okay, so you can see the two groups here. When you look at where this is on page 19 of your lesson book. If you look at the map, you see that Britain, France, and Russia, that's in red. So in your book, Germany, Austria-Hungary, okay, they're shaded, and Italy. They are surrounded by Britain, France, and Russia. So they really didn't promise to help each other, but together they encircled Germany and Austria-Hungary. And then nationalism caused many smaller language and cultural groups to fight against the larger empires like the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Here's an example. Serbian people disliked Austro-Hungarian control. As a result of a race to have more colonies, many countries like France and Russia, they had conflicts over land and resources. An example of that was the British Empire controlled the resources and people in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India, China, parts of Africa, and many more countries. On August 4th, 1914, war was declared between the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. Now the big question is, why was Canada automatically involved? Well, Canada, being a member of Britain's empire, remember it was colonized by Britain, that made them automatically involved. So as soon as Britain declared war on Germany, Canada was a part of it because Canada was a part of the British Empire. So widespread support for war in Canada at the start of the war, patriotism, feelings of excitement and adventure. Remember, men thought it would be an adventure, so men enlisted. And also, people had thought that it would be a short war. It started in August. They thought that they would be home by Christmas. Okay, they didn't know it was going to be from 1914 to 1918. Conscription on page 19. This is when the Canadian government promised Britain many men and resources in the First World War. So in order for them to give aid, the Canadian government did two things. So the first thing is that Canadian men were called to enlist to the war effort. Okay, they were conscripted. But French Canadians did not think that they should get involved in a European or British war. So you can see the tension between French Canadians and English Canadians, because English Canadians still felt strong loyalty to Britain and wanted to help them. Okay, the second support or aid is the income war tax. That was established. That was designed to be a temporary tax. That means when it's temporary, that means it's not, it shouldn't last. It's just a temporary solution. So a temporary tax to help pay for the high cost of the war. However, we know that the tax was continued after the war and is now known as income tax. Robert Borden was Canada's Prime Minister during the war. He promised Britain that he would contribute as much as it could during the war effort. Now, he promised French Canadians that there would be no conscription. So remember, conscription is forcing people to enlist in the army. And French Canadians did not have a strong connection to Britain, so they didn't want to support this mandatory service. What happened then? Well, Borden changed his mind in 1917. And his government passed the Military Service Act. And that meant that he ordered the conscription of all men between the ages of 20 and 45 years old. And as we saw earlier, many Canadians didn't like conscription, and the French especially opposed it because they saw the war as Britain's, not Canada's. There were few French officers in the army, and all of the manuals and commands were in English. So again, French soldiers were discriminated against. Most men from Quebec were farmers with large families, so if they left, they wouldn't be able to provide food for the war effort if they had to leave. In April 1918, there was a 3-day riot in Quebec City after a 23-year-old man was arrested for opposing conscription. So during the riot, 4 people were killed. Okay, that's in retaliation to conscription. Okay, let's look at which other key questions we can do. We can do key question 8. Why did French Canadians oppose conscription? So oppose means they disagreed with it. So remember to answer in a complete sentence. So French Canadians, you can say opposed or disagreed. So they opposed conscription, and then tell me why. Okay, don't just write because. So write French Canadians opposed conscription because. Okay, let's continue. Participation. Well, we had over 600,000 Canadian men and women who participated in the war by enlisting as nurses and soldiers. In general, people of color, including First Nation, Métis, Inuit, Black, and Asian Canadians, were not welcomed into the military. In 1915, Indigenous Canadians were allowed to enlist and join the 114th Battalion, among others. Black Canadians who served were segregated from other soldiers while overseas. Now, segregate means they're separated. No official policy on the recruitment of Aboriginal people. They were originally discouraged from enlisting. Policy would shift during the war to become more accepting of Aboriginal enlistment and recruitment. Those eager to enlist for service were sometimes turned away, while others were permitted to enlist. High casualty rates and the need for more troops led to new policies that now regarded Aboriginal recruits. So in 1915, military and government officials relaxed restrictions, issued formal guidelines, and allowed Aboriginal recruitment. So you can see here's the picture of recruitment of Aboriginal soldiers. They were called blood cadets from St. Paul's School. This is from the Glenbow archives. That was taken in July. And then by 1917, the government took a more active role in recruitment as a response to the need of more personnel. So Aboriginal agents held recruiting events on reserves to encourage more First Nations military or members to enlist. The Military Service Act instituted conscription, so it made no exemption for treaty Indians who had expected to be exempt because they did not have the rights of citizenship that obligated Canadian citizens to serve. So here is the 114th Battalion, also known as Brock's Rangers. So they drew extensively from the Six Nations of the Grand River and the Caughnawaga and St. Regis communities in Quebec. So the exact enlistment number is unknown, but it was estimated that well over 4,000 Aboriginal people served in the Canadian forces during the conflict. So here's the spotlight for Francis Pegahmagabow. His nickname was Peggy. He was born March 9th, 1891, Parry Sound, Ontario. He passed away August 5th, 1952 at age 61 in Parry Sound. Years of service, he served from 1914 to 1919. His rank, he was a corporal. Battles that he fought in World War I was the Second Battle of Ypres, Battle of Somme, Second Battle of Passchendaele, Battle of Scarpe. Awards he received, Military Medal and 2 bars. Other work he completed, he was the chief of Wasauksing First Nations from 1921 to 25, and then again 1942 to 45, and he was also a tribal councillor. Some details about Francis. He was highly decorated for bravery in Canadian military history. He was the most effective sniper of World War I. That military medal he won, he was awarded that 3 times. He was seriously wounded. He was an expert marksman and scout. He was credited with killing 378 Germans and capturing 300 more. So as tribal councillor, he served as chief and councillor and leader in several First Nations organizations. He corresponded with and met other noted Aboriginal figures, including Fred Loft, Jules Sioux, and Andrew Paul and John Tutusis. Other First Nations heroes from World War I included Henry Norwest, Alexander George Smith and Charles Smith, George McLean, Sam Glode, Tom Longboat, Edith Anderson, Private William Cleary, Private Joseph Rusin, and David Kiesick. Here's a picture of Private Tom Longboat, the indigenous long-distance runner, buying a paper from a French newspaper boy back in June 1917. So this one is from the Canada Department of National Defence Library and Archives, Canada. So again, this is historical evidence when you see pictures. Also a primary source. Shows us exactly what it looked like back then. Okay, next up is Canada's military role in World War I. So we have Canadian soldiers fighting their first major battle at Ypres in France. That was in 1915. Now in this battle, the German troops used a new and deadly weapon called chlorine gas. So this type of gas, so if you had taken PLAR science, we talked about chlorine. So this can burn the eyes, nose, and lungs of anyone who came near it. Canada's first great military victory came at the Battle of Vimy Ridge. They fought exceptionally well. They were awarded 4 Victoria Crosses at that battle. Now, one organization in particular was known as the Canadian Corps. You can see the picture here of life in the trenches. It's dangerous. They're keeping guard. It shows their sleeping conditions, their garments. So Canadian soldiers fought directly against those from the Triple Entente. During battles, the soldiers had to climb out of their trenches to pass through an area known as no man's land. This area, the bullets flew in every direction. There's barbed wire laying all about. Few men made it through the area. That's why it was called no man's land, because no one could control or hold it. Canadians also had great victory in the sky. They had their air ace in the First World War. It was Billy Bishop. He fought at least 170 battles. He downed 72 German planes. Now these aerial battles were known as dog fights. So like dogs, the planes would try to attack each other from behind. Bishop was involved in a dog fight with a famous Red Baron. He was a German fighter pilot. This was in 1917. Neither won, but Bishop proved he was a force to be reckoned with. Here's that again, another picture of Billy Bishop, and you can see the planes in the air. Okay, let's look at which key questions we can do here. We can do key questions 9 and 10. Okay, so key question 9 is you have to give 3 details about Francis Pegahmagabow. So you can make a list and just do 1, 2, and 3. Just 3 details. You can go to your lesson notes and find the answer there. Again, you don't need to look it up by searching on the internet. And then finally, key question 10, you can also do that one. What was the income war tax? Okay, so the income war tax, and then write your response. Next up is after the war. So after the war, that is on page 23. We have Canadians who helped the Triple Entente defeat Germany and the Triple Alliance. When was the war over? It was over on November 18th, 1918. The Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28th, 1919. Now this treaty had a guilt clause. Now, the guilt clause imposed a heavy penalty on Germany. What that means is that Germany was blamed for the cost of the war. So Germany was forced to give all the land back that it conquered. It had to pay for the damages of the war, and it would allow the troops from the Triple Entente to stay in Germany to oversee them. So here's in detail the Treaty of Versailles. This is how Germany was affected. They were affected territorial, military, financial, and general. So Germany's army, so first of all, their territory that Germany conquered, they were lost to them. So Germany's army was reduced to 100,000 men. The army was not allowed tanks. It was not allowed an air force. It was only allowed 6 capital naval ships and no submarines. The west of the Rhineland and 50 kilometers east of the River Rhine was made into a demilitarized zone. That means no German soldier or weapon was allowed into this zone. The Allies were to keep an army of occupation on the west bank of the Rhine for 15 years. Okay, so that's the first part. Territorial lost to Germany. Military. Germany's army was reduced to 100,000 men. So that means that their military had restrictions. It limits army, forbids navy and air force. Again, I mentioned earlier they weren't allowed tanks. And then number 3 is the war guilt clause. That means the burden of the war. So Germany had the sole responsibility for war, and they had to pay 33 billion in war reparations. So that's the financial loss. Of course, this would prevent Germany to rebuild her economy. Coal from the Saar and Upper Silesia in particular was a vital economic loss. So you combine that with financial penalties. It seemed clear to Germany that the Allies wanted nothing else but for Germany to be bankrupt. They were also forbidden to unite with Austria to form one superstate, so that it would keep her economic potential to a minimum. Okay, the League of Nations formed, so Germany, Russia were excluded. In 1918, nobody wanted to repeat the mass slaughter of the war. The First World War should be the war that ended all wars. Of course, we know that's not true. Countries needed to find a place to meet and collaborate to find peaceful solutions to their disputes. So in 1919, in order to try to prevent any future wars, a group of countries decided to set up an organization called the League of Nations. And the League's goals, their intention, included disarmament, preventing future wars, settling disputes through negotiation, and global welfare. So you can see a picture there of the League of Nations from 1919 to 1939. Okay, so before we go, let's look at which key questions you can try. Let's try these two. What is the guilt clause, and what did Germany have to do after the war? So the first part of the question, the guilt clause. So you tell me what that is. And then Germany after the war, what did they have to do? Had to, and then tell me your response. The last one that we'll do today is Key question 12, describe the League of Nations. So again, two parts. So the League of Nations, and then tell me its purpose. Okay, what was it meant to do? Okay, and that's it. We will continue with lesson 1 on Tuesday next week. So again, for those students who reapplied or are new students to PLAR, you have a choice of or option of completing an open book culminating activity instead of doing the key questions in the lessons. So if you choose to do that, make sure you contact myself and or Bonnie, and we will send you the culminating activity. Okay, that's it for today. Have a good weekend. Miigwech.